Here. That's great. I'm Mignon Lamia. I'm the Communications Director at Inclusive Development International, or IDI. Before we get started, I just want to share a few logistics regarding interpretation. While this webinar is going to be in English only, we will have simultaneous interpretation available for similar webinars in the near future, trainings on these tools. So please do reach out if you have specific language requests. And we'll also have a Q&A session at the end today. So you can use the Q&A feature, which should be at the bottom of your screen anytime during the webinar to submit your questions. And we are recording this webinar and we'll share it with registrants, everybody who registered afterwards. Great. So everyone's here today for a demonstration of our latest Follow the Money tools. And so for those of you who are new to IDI, to Inclusive Development International, we are an organization that supports communities around the world to defend their rights, their land, and other resources against harmful internationally financed investment projects. So mines, pipelines, agribusiness, and so on. We do this primarily by following the money, so conducting in-depth research on the web of actors that are investing in or sourcing from these harmful projects. And then we help community advocates use that information to design and carry out advocacy strategies that target those actors. And we also offer a range of trainings and online resources and tools to help other advocates do this, who are doing this work on their own. And all of those resources, the online tools, are housed at our Following the Money to Justice website at followingthemoney.org. So you can access all of that there. And the two tools that we're going to be talking about today, the Shareholder Tracker and the Development Bank Investment Tracker, are housed on that site. Our research team built these tools in collaboration with the Data Science Institute at the University of Chicago. And we're working on a few other tools with them also that are going to be available soon. This includes a commercial debt tracker, which, as the name suggests, will allow users to search for loan and other debt transactions between commercial banks and specific companies. So you'll be able to find that tool also at followingthemoney.org, and we'll hold another webinar like this to walk people through how to use it. And we'll be aiming to hold these webinars pretty regularly here on out, just to help people use all of the resources we have and answer any questions you have. So stay tuned for all of that. But for today, we have with us IDI's Senior Research Director, Dustin Rosa, who is going to walk you through the Shareholder Tracker and the DeBIT tools, what they can do, how you can use them in your work. And then we also have with us Lana Greer, the software engineer at the Data Science Institute, who led development of the tools from their end. And Lana's going to say a few words about that process and about what DSI does. And they'll both be here at the end to answer any questions you have. So with that, I will hand it over to Dustin to get started.
Thank you, Mignon. Hey, everyone. Thank you so much for joining today. My name is Dustin Rosa. I'm the Research Director at Inclusive Development International, IDI for short. And I'm really excited to show you our redesigned Shareholder Tracker and Development Bank Investment Tracker tools. My organization, IDI, as Mignon was saying, has worked with the Data Science Institute at the University of Chicago to build these tools. And we're so grateful for our partnership with the Institute and the amazing data scientists that we get to work with, including Lana, of course, who's on the call. And we're also grateful to Chris Potvin and the data science students at Warren Wilson College who contributed to these tools. So the idea for these tools really comes from a place of need. So the cornerstone of IDI's work is following the money behind projects that harm people on the planet. And we do that in a couple of ways. We do our own corporate investigations of harmful projects, and that's on request from civil society organizations around the world. And at this point, we've done more than 400 investigations. And we also offer a range of training to groups that want to learn how to do this research. And our digital tools are really designed to help other human rights advocates in the field do their own corporate investigations. But really, I mean, anyone doing corporate research is going to find these tools useful, I hope. And that could be, journalists, that could be researchers, that could be, academics. And you can find all of our tools on our Follow the Money online resource, and that's at followingthemoney.org. And I'm going to show you that in a minute. But before we dive into the tools, I wanted to introduce a little case study that I think is going to help us frame the demonstrations. Let me just share my screen real quick. Bear with me. Everyone can see that, I hope. Okay. So 9 years ago, we at IDI got involved in a case in the West African country of Guinea. So local communities there had been violently evicted to make way for a gold mine that was operated by a South African company called AngloGold Ashanti. Now, the communities in Guinea asked us to investigate the investment and supply chain behind that mine to see if we could find new pressure points of leverage that they could use to better defend their rights. And IDI has actually represented these communities over the long haul in their struggle for justice. And the communities have actually finally secured remedy after a very, very long fight. And you can read more about that on our website. But our involvement in this case really started with our investigation of this mining company, which the community advocates, they asked us to do. So anytime we do one of these investigations, one of the first things that we want to know is who are the shareholders of the company that controls the project that is causing harm. So this is where our first tool, the Shareholder Tracker, is just extremely useful. Some of you may have used the old version of the tool, which we used to house in our DeBIT tool, which we'll show you in a minute. But this new Shareholder Tracker has its own standalone website, and it's just many, many, many times more powerful than the previous version. So you can find the tool, really all of our tools, on our Follow the Money website, which is at followingthemoney.org. So I'm going to show you that now. And here's the homepage. So if you go to the homepage of our Follow the Money site and you scroll down here to the middle of the homepage, you will see our Follow the Money data tools. And this is where we're housing all of our tools. Right now, we have our Development Bank Investment Tracker, which I'll show you in a minute, our Shareholder Tracker, and then also Palm Watch, which is our palm oil tracker tool. Well, let's go ahead and open the Shareholder Tracker. Now, before we start using the data on the Shareholder Tracker, I think it's useful to know what's actually in the Shareholder Tracker and what's not in the tracker. So if we go to the About page, we can find out more about that. And so the Shareholder Tracker is really scraping data from kind of two key sources. And that's described in these two bullet points here. And the first source in that first bullet point is the United States Securities and Exchange Commission's website, which is called EDGAR. So every quarter, more than 4,200 institutional investors disclose to the SEC what companies they hold shares in. Now, these investors disclose this information to the SEC on what's known as a 13F form, 13F filing. And so who is required to file a 13F form with the SEC? So that's any institutional investor that manages more than $100 million in assets, which sounds like a lot, but it's actually not. It's a pretty low bar. And then also does business in the United States. And it's important to point out here that not all of the investors that meet these requirements to disclose to the SEC are actually physically based in the US. They just need to do business in the US. And that can mean they're using the US Postal Service. And so what our Shareholder Tracker tool is doing is it's scraping these 13F forms on a quarterly basis when they actually have to be filed. I think it's also important to know what kinds of investments that these investors need to disclose on these 13F forms. So it's only investments in shares of companies that are listed on US stock exchanges. And so that's a universe of about 15,000 or so companies. I think it's like 15,500. So to kind of sum up, with this SEC data, we're tracking more than 2 million investments made by about 4,200 investors in more than 15,000 companies. So it's a really, really large universe of investments that we're looking at here. But in addition to the SEC data, we also added some targeted data from other sources that we consider to be pretty important for corporate accountability work. And you see that described here in that second bullet point. So we're also scraping directly from the websites of 17 European pension funds that are not required to disclose to the SEC. And you see their names here, starting with Norges Bank. And so this list of 17 funds includes, pension funds that tend to care about human rights and the environment. In our experience, they tend to be willing to engage companies over concerns through, voting on shareholder resolutions, through direct engagement with companies, and some of them even have exclusion lists of companies that they make public. So anyway, that's the data. So enough about that. Let's actually show you how the tool works. So if we go back to the database tab, this is the main screen where you can do all the searching that you want to do. And if I scroll down here, if I'm looking at a company, I just want to type in the name of the company there. So I type in the name of the company. It's not case sensitive, but I'm going to type in AngloGold Ashanti. It is important to say, even though it's not case sensitive, you do need to get the spelling right of the company. This is not like Google where it's going to suggest other results if you get the spelling wrong. You really have to get that precisely right to get the accurate results that you're looking for. But if I type in the name of AngloGold Ashanti, I get 445 results. So what that tells us is there are 445 shareholders in AngloGold Ashanti that we're tracking on the shareholder tracker. We've got a bunch of columns here. What do these all mean? The first one on the left, investor, is the actual name of the shareholder that is holding shares in AngloGold Ashanti. Company, obviously, is the name of the company that the investor holds shares in. In this case, it's AngloGold Ashanti. And we see that consistently throughout the column. So we're looking at the same company here. We also have some identifying information related to the company. So we have the stock exchange ticker for the company. In this case, it's not being reported on these 13F filings, but we also have something called the QZIP, which is another sort of identifying number that's connected to the company that the investor holds shares in. So in this case, we're seeing the same QZIP throughout, which refers to AngloGold Ashanti. So we have the right company, and you can cross-reference that if you needed to make sure. We also have the market value of the shares that the investor holds. It's just really important to note here that this is the market value that was disclosed at the time of the 13F filing. So, as we all know, share prices go up and down every day, sometimes every hour. So this is not reflecting current reality. It's the time of the filing. It's the market value, but it gives you a good sense of the value of the shares that investor holds. Total shares, obviously, is the number of shares that investor holds in the company. Report date is the date of the filing. If it's the SEC, it's the date that the filing was made with the SEC. If it's another disclosure, it's just the date of that disclosure that we're using. And then you get to this last column here, which is investor type. And this is really important. And this is something that we added. This is not being disclosed to the SEC, but we thought it was very important to add this category. So we have two types of investors in the shareholder tracker. We have institutional investors, which you see here, and that is just kind of a general category for all types of institutional investors. But we also have another category of investor, and that is pension funds. And so that's not just those 17 European pension funds that I mentioned that we're scraping directly, but it also includes dozens of US pension funds that are actually having to report to the SEC. And that includes really big pension funds like TIAA, CREF, but also state level funds like the big California pension funds such as CalPERS and CalSTRS. So they're all labeled as pension funds. So once you've done a search on a company, you can do a few things with the data. And the first thing that I like to do when I have a shareholder list like this is I like to sort the investor by the size of their stake in the company, because this is going to tell us which investors have the most leverage over that company through things like voting rights and direct engagement and their financial stake. So the way to do that is to go up to this sorting tab up here and click it. And I want to sort all of this by market value of the shares held. And I want to do that in descending order. So I want to see the biggest shareholders in AngloGold Ashanti at the top. So when I do that, I see at the top, the largest shareholder that we're tracking of AngloGold Ashanti is an investment firm called BlackRock, which I'm guessing most of us are familiar with. It's the largest asset manager in the world. and it holds close to $2 billion in shares in AngloGold Ashanti. And if we kind of look down the list, we see some other very large asset managers, Vanguard, Fidelity. But then we get to this fourth one here, which is interesting. And we see here that it's a pension fund. It's not a big institutional investor. It's a pension fund. And that is called Norges Bank. And many of you have probably heard of Norges Bank, but it is the government-managed pension fund. It's really a sovereign wealth fund of Norway, the country of Norway. And this is a shareholder that ended up being very important for us in this case, because we were able to successfully engage Norges Bank over the impacts of the gold mine in Guinea. So it's very important that we identified Norges Bank as a shareholder. But we also successfully engaged other pension funds on this case. So if you wanted to see the other pension funds that hold shares in a company, in AngloGold Ashanti in this case, we could do that by filtering the data by investment type. So to filter the data, we go up here, we click on this tab. Right now, we're viewing all of the data, so it's that mix of institutional investors and pension funds. We just want to see the pension funds that hold shares in AngloGold Ashanti. So we click there, and what we see is we've got 25 pension funds that are holding shares in AngloGold Ashanti. Now, these are still all sorted by the size of their stake, with the largest shareholders up top. So again, we see Norges Bank, which we knew about, but then we see this next one here, which is the Teacher Retirement System of Texas, the US state of Texas, holds about a $50 billion stake in the company. And if we kind of scroll down through these other 25, we're seeing a mix of European and US pension funds that hold shares in the company that may be worth engaging, but we would want to do further analysis on these pension funds. All right, so let's unfilter the data and put all the investors back together. There are a few more things that you can do with this data that I wanted to show you. The first is you can get a little bit more detail on each of these investors and their investments. And you can do that by going up here and toggling. We're in the list mode now, but we can do the card view to get more information on each investor. So it's the same list, it's the 445, but we're getting these cards that are telling us a little bit more data. So for instance, with BlackRock, we're seeing what percentage of the shares that they hold in the company actually have voting rights when they go to the AngloGold Ashanti AGM, which can be useful for advocacy and engagement. The second thing that you can do is you can actually look at the sources of data that we're scraping from if you want to corroborate and verify what you're seeing. So let me go back to the list view here. So if we wanted to, for instance, see the underlying source document that we're pulling from on the Deutsche Bank investment in AngloGold Ashanti, we would just go to that row and we would double click on that row, and you could do that with any of them. And so what that does is it actually takes us to the SEC filing area. So this is where you can get information on Deutsche Bank's 13F filing, its latest one. And so what I would do here is I would click on this info table, and this is just going to be a list of all of Deutsche Bank's investments as disclosed to the SEC. So I would scroll down here, a lot of them here, but I would find, it's all alphabetical. I would find AngloGold Ashanti in this list, and it would corroborate what I'm seeing in the shareholder tracker. And I just wanted to scroll down and show you that because there's one other point I wanted to make about that. Getting there. Let's do this. Okay. So we see here there are actually about 7 or 8 separate lines for AngloGold Ashanti, and these are probably various funds that Deutsche Bank is managing. So it's listing these separately, but the shareholder tracker does a nice job of just putting all of these together. So we see one kind of investment for Deutsche Bank and AngloGold Ashanti. Okay, so let's go back to the tracker. The last thing that I wanted to show you is we have a download feature. So if you click on this, you're actually able to download the shareholder list that you're seeing. And this is great because you may not want to come back to the shareholder tracker every time to look at a shareholder list of a company. You may want to just download it. So you can download it as a CSV file onto your hard drive, and you can view it using Google Sheets or Excel or whatever you want. But you can take that with you, which is very, very useful. So that's the shareholder tracker and kind of what it does. The last thing that I wanted to say about the tool is that the shareholder tracker is just one tool in the toolbox for uncovering the shareholders of companies. You're going to want to use other tools to get a fuller picture. So as I mentioned, the tracker is only capturing investors that do business in the US, along with those 17 European pension funds that we're scraping directly. So for an investor that doesn't meet those thresholds, those definitions, you're going to need to use other sources to supplement the shareholder tracker, and I absolutely encourage you to do that. So in the case of AngloGold Ashanti, its largest shareholder is actually the Public Investment Corporation of South Africa. So this is a big South African pension fund, and it is not disclosing to the SEC. It's not required to do so. So we had to find them. We had to identify them using other sources. And we lay out how to do all that on our researching shareholders page of the Follow the Money website. So I'll just show you what that is. You go to our homepage, Following the Money. We have these drop-down menus. How to Follow the Money is where all of our sort of research materials are. And if you go to this page here, Researching Shareholders, we give you information that's useful in doing this research, defining the terms, how to think about assessing them as pressure points for advocacy. And then we have a list of sources that you would want to use in addition to the shareholder tracker to do this research. Okay, so I know I've thrown a lot of information at you about the shareholder tracker. We're going to open it up to questions at the end, but I wanted to go ahead and show you the next tool that we want to demo. And that is our Development Bank Investment Tracker, or DeBIT for short. So let's go back to the homepage of our Follow the Money website. And okay, so the DeBIT tool scrapes the investments of 16 development finance institutions, and it scrapes from their websites and puts all of that data in one place. So it's very easy to find. And for us at IDI, I mean, development finance institutions are really crucial for our research because they tend to have pretty strong social and environmental policies for their investments. Many of them have independent complaints mechanisms that people affected by their activities can access. And this ended up being a really important strategy in the AngloGold Ashanti gold mine case because it really became the pathway for affected communities to secure remedy. So anytime we're doing a corporate investigation, we're always very focused on uncovering the involvement of development finance institutions because they're just such important pressure points for advocacy. So our DeBIT tool is really designed to help you do that research. So let's go there now. So we're on our homepage, followingthemoney.org. Again, we go back to our data tools, and it's here at the top, Development Bank Investment Tracker. Let's launch it. And again, before we use this tool, I think it's important to know what's in it and what's not. So let's click on the About page and learn more about that. So DeBIT is scraping all of the investments made by 16 development finance institutions that have accountability mechanisms. And you can see the full list here. It ranges from big multilateral banks like the World Bank to smaller bilateral banks like Proparco in France. And so DeBIT is scraping this information from the websites every 2 weeks. And so the information is quite current. So let's look at the data. So you see here, we are tracking more than 100,000 investments. So you're able to search, filter, and sort all of that data, however you want to do it, using the columns and the search fields. Just to sort of explain what the columns mean, this first one here on the left is sort of obviously it's the bank. It's the name of the development finance institution that's actually made the investment. So in this case, it's the Asian Development Bank, ADB. Now, name is the name of the investment that's being made, and that's as described by the development finance institutions. We're just pulling that title, the name of the investment, from the website of the bank. Year is the name the investment was signed. You see here, we don't always have that information because the banks are not always disclosing that, but when we do have that information, we are putting it here. Original is the actual amount of the investment, and that's in the original currency. And then if it's not in US dollars, we convert it here to US dollars. And then the last column here is status. And this is the most recent status of the project or the investment, really, as reported by the Development Finance Institution. So you're going to see things like, approved, active, completed. Sometimes you might see other when, there's nothing disclosed. But that's all listed here in status. And there are additional columns that you can look at as well. So if you click on this eye up here, it's going to show you some additional columns that you can be looking at. The first one here is instrument. So that's the actual financial instrument that the development bank is using. So that could be, a loan, it could be a guarantee, it could be an equity investment. But that can be useful to see, when you're doing this research. You can also see the country or the sector that the investment was made in. And this last one here is, I think, quite useful. Affiliates. I'm just going to go ahead and click on that one so you can see it. And I'll scroll over. And what this column is doing is it's bringing all the other entities that might be involved in this deal. So, it could be the borrower. In this case, it's also showing the name of the bank that's making the investment. But it also could be other entities, like other banks that may have joined in the deal, or government agencies, or really any other key entity involved in the deal. And this is as disclosed by that development finance institution on their website. So let us do a search on our company, AngloGold Ashanti. And again, not case sensitive, but you do want to get the spelling right. And we get one hit. So that was an investment made by the IFC, the International Finance Corporation, 1996. So it's 30 years old, so it's quite old. And we look at the status here and we see that that investment has been completed. So what that tells us is the business relationship between the IFC and AngloGold Ashanti has finished. There is no business relationship anymore. We also see the name here. This looks to be an investment in a gold mine potentially in Ghana. So this is not going to be a useful, investment for us to be looking at for our case because our case is a gold mine in Guinea. But one of the things that we know, and some of you also might know this, from doing a lot of these investigations, is that development finance institutions also, in addition to giving money directly to companies and projects, they also give a lot of money to third parties in the financial sector, like banks, funds, insurers. And those entities, those actors then provide support to corporations and projects. And this is a practice known as financial intermediary lending. It is way beyond the scope of this webinar to discuss how all of this works and how we analyze these sorts of relationships. But I will say our Follow the Money website has a lot of content on this. We've got guides on research and advocacy. We also have some great case studies that you can look at. So I would just encourage you to check all of that out. And we can also offer a webinar on this topic if you are interested. So please get in touch if you are. But anytime we're investigating a company, so we're going to be looking for indirect links to development finance institutions through these financial intermediaries, these third-party financial actors. And most big companies like AngloGold Ashanti have business relationships with dozens, usually it's hundreds of banks, investment funds, and other types of financial actors. So what we need to do is we need to check if each of these actors are clients of development finance institutions. And so before DeBIT, you can imagine, we had to do this by hand. This would take hours. This would take days often to be searching all of this stuff across 16 websites. Also, the margin for error was quite high if you're doing that much sort of hand searching. With DeBIT, this research is just so much faster and it's much more accurate. So with AngloGold Ashanti, what we did is we investigated the investment chain behind that mine and that company, and we ended up compiling a list of all of the banks that were lending it money, based on our research. So there were about 20 banks in there. I just want to show you a list of those banks. So these are the 20 or so banks that we uncovered doing business with AngloGold Ashanti. And this is just the banks. It's not showing all the funds, insurers, and other actors that are also doing business with the company. So you'd have to run searches for all of these across the 16 development finance institutions. But with DeBIT, you can do all of that in a centralized place and you can get all of the results at one time. And so one of the banks that we ended up zeroing in on in our research is a bank called Nedbank, which you see listed here. It's a South African commercial bank that had loaned money, a large amount of money to AngloGold Ashanti. So we would have put AngloGold Ashanti, we didn't have debit at the time, but you can now put Nedbank in here to see if it's a client of a development finance institution. And what we see here is there's 17 hits. So that tells us there are 17 separate times that a development finance institution has provided money or some other kind of financial support to Nedbank. And so what we'd want to do is we'd want to go through each of these 17 results to try to analyze whether we think the development finance institution is somehow financially exposed to the mine in West Africa. And that would allow affected communities to consider filing a complaint to one of the development finance institutions' accountability mechanisms. So what we did is we looked at all of these. We ended up zeroing in on an investment from 2007, you can see here, made by the IFC, the International Finance Corporation. The title of that investment was Nedbank Tier 2. It says here that that investment has now ended, but at the time that we were looking, this is like 9 years ago, that investment was active. And so, like the shareholder tracker, you can double click on any of these results to actually get to the source document so you can read more. And especially with this research, I absolutely encourage you to do that because those source documents are going to have really critical information that you're going to need to do this kind of analysis. So I'm going to double click on Nedbank Tier 2, and that's going to take me to the IFC website where I'm going to get more information on that IFC investment in 2007 in Nedbank. And so what we would do is we'd take all this information that we're getting from the IFC and we would sort of compare it to what we had found on the Nedbank loan to AngloGold Ashanti. We would do an analysis. We would look at the eligibility requirements for the mechanism that we were looking at, in this case, the IFC's mechanism. And in doing that analysis, we concluded that the IFC was in fact financially exposed to the gold mine that we were looking at in Guinea. And so the communities were able to file a complaint to the IFC's accountability mechanism. And that mechanism found the complaint admissible, eligible, based on the financial evidence that we had gathered. So this really opened up a pathway for mediation between the communities and the gold mining company. And skipping ahead many, many years and many years of hard negotiations, those mediations have resulted in remedy for the communities affected by the mine. And that wouldn't have been possible without the financial research that allowed us to make those connections, which DeBIT is designed to help you do. So you can read more about how to research development finance institutions, including how to analyze these financial intermediary relationships on our Follow the Money website. Let me just show you where to find that. Again, if you want to look at the research page, it's the How to Follow the Money dropdown, and we've got a whole page on researching development banks. If you want to look at how to use the actual mechanisms in advocacy, it's this tab, and you can click on this page to get more information. You can also read more about the gold mine case in Guinea and the community's successful struggle for remedy on the IDI website, inclusivedevelopment.net. Share all these links in the chat. And yeah, that's it. So thanks so much, everybody. I know I've covered a lot of ground here. We're going to be sharing a recording of this demonstration for everyone that registered for the webinar. I think we're also going to put it up on our Follow the Money site. But also, please feel free to get in touch if you have questions about the tools, if you have ideas of new features that we could add. We're going to put our email addresses in the chat. And with that, I will pass it to Lana to talk about how the Data Science Institute works and how they built these amazing tools. Lana, over to you.
Thanks so much, Dustin. And again, happy to be here and help contribute to the amazing work that IDI is doing. So again, I'm Lana. I'm a software engineer at the Data Science Institute and part of a team within the Institute that is dedicated to furthering data science for social impact. Share my screen so you can have an idea of what our website looks like. Right. So we are funded by a grant from the 11th Hour Project of the Schmidt Family Foundation, which allows us to work with nonprofits and social impact startups in areas like human rights and environmental sustainability at no cost. So we try to always follow certain pillars for community-centered data science. And so that includes prioritizing people, organization, and community, making sure that our partners are always in control of their data, pursuing equity and justice. Always considering legal, political, and cultural contexts of the technology that we produced and centering equity. Privacy and security is something that we always guarantee. And then also having transparency, accountability, and an ethical approach to what we do. Especially in the age of like AI, it's important to know the biases associated with different technology and make good technological choices. And so encourage you, if you have a chance, to just check out our website, some of our previous projects, and see if we could be a benefit to your organization as well, if you're in the social impact space. But wanted to just piggyback off what Dustin mentioned in this great presentation to highlight a few technical notes with the tools as well. If you had been using DeBIT in the shareholder tracker previously, for a lot of great new additions that we think you'll enjoy. So for DeBIT in particular, I think it's important to note that we have a lot of additional dates at this point. So you can download entire search results by clicking a button. This should be a lot faster now than it was previously because we're using a file-based backend. And so queries are now pretty immediate. When you download the data from the table, it will be rendered as a CSV file that can be opened in Excel. Expand the columns a bit. And yeah, I just wanted to highlight the fact that there are many different dates that actually aren't exposed through the table directly, but if you wanted to explore on your own, you could see where that data is coming from. So we have dates of the loan's effectiveness, when it was disclosed, approved, planned, revised, and then we have a methodology for exposing a particular year, on the DeBIT website for the loan, but you can see the dates that went into determining that year. Also of note, we are using the IMF's currency exchange rates, and you can actually see that in the output file as well if you care to explore. So you can see again the total amount and the original currency. And so you could see the conversion year and the conversion rate that was used to map non-US dollars to US dollars. So again, this is for those who might want to dig deeper into the data. I just wanted to highlight that this is available as well. Similarly, for the shareholder tracker, there is a bulk downloads page. And so we will continue to update this page. The data in the table should reflect the most recent investments. And then this page would be for more historical data. So you can download a data dictionary that explains the different fields within each of the download files. And then here, depending on your workflow, you could download it as a regular CSV Excel, but also Parquet and then SQLite if you prefer to work with more database heavy formats. But again, we are continuing to take feedback on these tools. We also want to be able to spot and correct any technical errors or bugs as quickly as possible. So if you notice anything, please do reach out and contact us, or if you have any other future ideas for the tools, as Dustin mentioned, we'd be happy to take that feedback. And yeah, now happy to also open it up to questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lana and Dustin. That was super interesting and always really impressed by this collaboration. It's been so cool. So yeah, lots to play around with in these tools. We wanted to open it up now to your questions. You can drop them in the Q&A, as I mentioned. If you're on a phone, you probably need to tap on the three dots to get to the Q&A feature. And you can also drop them in the chat to hosts and panelists, and we'll see them there. Or if you'd like, you can raise your hand and we can let you ask your question live. So yeah, reach out with those. I think one question we got during the presentations was about, I think related to the shareholder tracker, usefulness of seeing this for in the US context. Question is whether you all are aware of, or if there are similar databases for other locations.
Yeah, I can take that. It's a great question from Britta. So the short answer is no. There's nothing else like this in terms of the SEC. So the SEC is requiring investors to disclose on a quarterly basis, the shares that they hold companies in. No other jurisdiction that I know of has anything similar, any similar requirement. Many jurisdictions require companies to disclose key shareholders, so they might have thresholds for that. So a shareholder that holds more than 5%, they may have to disclose that. So there's nothing like the 13F filing in the world, as far as I know. You can fact check me on that if I'm wrong. Please let me know. But there are options to add data to the shareholder tracker, but we would have to do that piecemeal. And that's kind of what we've done with these 17 European pension funds that we think are very important because they're not disclosing to the SEC and because Europe does not require them to exchange or to disclose. They are voluntarily disclosing. So if there are investors out there that you think are important for us to be tracking and they are disclosing, the companies that they hold shares in, we could add those. We would do it by hand. We are working on a system with Warren Wilson College to automate that. But at this point, if there's a critical shareholder that you think should be captured, please let us know and we could consider adding it. But there's nothing like the 13F anywhere else in the world, as far as I know.
Thanks, Dustin. Another question about specifics in the shareholder tracker. Do you all know if U.S. university endowment investments are included in the shareholder tracker? I.e., are they included? Are they required to report to the SEC?
That is a very good question. Certainly, there are pension funds that are connected to universities or university systems. I'm thinking of the University of Wisconsin system. Its pension fund is disclosing to the SEC. Endowments, I'm not sure. I mean, you'd have to look at the SEC requirements. Again, that's more than $100 million in assets under management and does business in the US. They may, in fact, meet that requirement. I would suggest doing a search on the name of that endowment and seeing if it's in there. And if it's not, that's an interesting possibility of an investor that we could add. I'm not sure where, if they're not disclosing to the SEC, where they might be disclosing. There are other parts, where sort of foundations and charities are disclosing. It's possible that they're filing there, and we could add that data. But please get in touch. But yeah, I would suggest doing a search on whatever endowment you're interested in, seeing if it's in the tracker, and if it's not, get in touch, and we could consider adding it. That's a good question.
Great. We have one other question, and the person asking, please raise your hand and ask yourself if I'm not getting this right. But I think the question is about what other, we have this. You showed a couple of resources for help kind of figuring out what this tool does and how to use it, but kind of if you want to share again what other resources are there to kind of help guide people in testing this out.
Yeah, so that would be other kind of resources that you could use to identify shareholders. Am I getting that right, Mignon?
I think, well, I think that's probably helpful. But I think the question is specifically, why don't you answer that and then you or Lana talk about, so I think the question is specifically talking about consulting the data dictionary and, what other resources can folks use like that?
I think I could take a first stab at this. Yes, so I think that what I'm reading this as is as just understanding the methodology like a bit more and how to interpret and use the tracker as well. So again, like the reading the about pages thoroughly, the data dictionary will definitely help. I think cross-referencing the data on the site with the original data sources that are linked will also help. I think we used to have like a bit more of a write-up with the methodology that may have gotten lost in the shuffle as we did updates. But yeah, I think it'd be great to post that more specifically, and I can try to prioritize that for the future. A more detailed explanation of the fields.
Thanks, Lana. And I guess, Dustin, did you want to share anything more about resources for researching shareholders? Thanks, Lana, for interpreting that question.
Yeah, thank you, Lana. Yeah, I can just show you very quickly. Again, it would be on our Following the Money website, which I'll just share my screen again. So if you go to this drop down, how to follow the money, this is where all of our research resources are. And we have pages on different parts of the investment and supply chain. So, corporate structures, shareholders, lenders, and then also supply chains. We also have a section on privately held companies, which is different than publicly traded companies. But if you go to that researching shareholders page, and you scroll down to the bottom, we have a kind of list of all kinds of different sources that you might use. So market websites like Yahoo Finance, Market Screener, actually looking at filings made by companies or investors. Corporate registries can be useful as well, public records requests, FOI requests. So we kind of lay all those resources out as well. We also have a Follow the Money toolkit, which I can just show you very, very briefly. But this is just a much bigger kind of compilation of all of the tools that we would use in researching different parts of the investment and supply chain behind a company. We have a tab on researching shareholders, which is where we're parking all this stuff, and we've got many different tabs looking at different thematic sort of parts of the investment and supply chain. So you can also check that out.
Great, thanks, Dustin. We also had a question about kind of doing the research in the opposite direction, I think, from linking project companies to shareholders, but what about doing research on shareholders and linking them to projects?
Yeah, I mean, that's quite easy to do with the shareholder tracker. Essentially, what you'd want to do is you'd want to type in the name of the shareholder that you're interested in, the investor you're interested in, just in the search bar. And it's going to pull up a bunch of results, again, those rows. But if you were to double click on that row, it's going to take you to the full disclosure of all of the investments that particular investment holds. So that will give you a kind of complete picture. So if you wanted to kind of go from, as opposed to from the ground up, which is, case study that we were doing from the mine to the investors, if you wanted to look at, all the investments that a particular investor holds, you could do it that way. You could actually get to that filing, which we did with Deutsche Bank, if you remember. So we got to the 13F filing that Deutsche Bank made, and it showed, the hundreds, probably thousands of companies that shareholder held.
Yeah, and I'll just piggyback and say DeBIT works the same way. So you could search for a project name or an affiliated company. And if there is a text match, that should show up in the results.
Great, thanks. We also have a question about essentially that you need to start with the project name and the company, the specific mine or project related company, the developer that you need to type in. But Do you have any guidance on kind of getting to that point?
Yeah, we do. I mean, that also on our Following the Money website, we have a whole page on that. It's researching corporate structures. Really critical part of our research because it's very important to get that link right between the project that you're looking at that's causing harm and the company that actually controls it. Because all the other sort of parts of the investment chain kind of flow from that company. So it's really important that you get it right. But we've got a guide on how to do that, again, on our Follow the Money website. I would also say we have a tool under development that we hope to roll out I don't know, the next 18 months or so. That's a corporate structure tracker that will automate this stuff. So very often what you'll see is there might be a locally registered subsidiary that's controlling a project. So in the case of the gold mine in Guinea, it was a locally registered part of AngloGold Ashanti. So what you'd be able to do is you'd be able to type that name in of that local subsidiary into our corporate structure tracker, and then that would link to the parent company, in this case, AngloGold Ashanti. So right now you have to do that by hand. We have a guide on how to do that on our Follow the Money website, but we're developing a tool that will automate that process that we hope to launch soon.
Great, thanks, Dustin. We also have a question about filtering geographically, looking at specific country for the shareholders and projects.
I would say DeBIT does allow that functionality now. There is a countries column, and that it's not shown by default, but as Dustin mentioned, just click the I button, and then you can type into that, or you can type into the main search field. With the shareholder tracker, actually, I'm going to test this right now. So if you go into the card view, you can sometimes see country information, or excuse me, which country a company is affiliated with. I think that is in the that will come up in search the search field as well. I have to double test that though. So yeah, I would do that for now. But again, as Dustin mentioned, we're continuing to update these tools and make them a little bit more robust. So if that is useful, we can consider adding that as a future feature, a little bit more robust geography searching.
Great, thanks. We also had a question about how frequently these are updated, and I think that's an important feature of these updates. So I'll let either Lana or Dustin address that.
Hey, right. So right now, DeBIT is updated bi-weekly. The banks do change their websites from time to time. There might be a week where an update for a bank is slower just because they've updated the websites or scrapers aren't able to get that information. So we try to make a quick fix and then get the bank corrected so that we'll output the correct data, the updated data. The next time the scrapers are executed. But yeah, roughly every 2 weeks for DeBIT. The shareholder tracker is updated quarterly and can go to Dustin to talk more about why that's the case.
Yeah, it's quarterly because that's when investors are required to file their 13Fs with the SEC. So when they do that, we want to get the latest data. So we do it on a quarterly basis.
Okay. And that will work for like how about the pension fund updates?
The pension funds right now we're doing by hand, and again we're hoping to automate that. And they're disclosing on an irregular basis. Some are doing it annually, some quarterly, so it really depends. But I'd like to get to the point where we're doing it on a quarterly basis as well to make sure we're capturing the latest stuff. But we're working on that. We're working on that.
Great, thank you guys. We also had a question about whether this tool can be useful for someone looking to guide their investments to invest responsibly or bank responsibly.
I can take a stab at that. I mean, I think it can be useful, probably not in isolation, but it definitely can be useful, particularly if you're invested in a pension fund, for instance. If you're an educator or researcher in the US, you're probably invested in TIAA. And so you can actually see what TIAA holds using the shareholder tracker. It's less useful for something like a 401k because that's fund level. And we're not really working at the fund level here. We're working at the institutional investor level. But it can be useful. And I would also say there are other groups out there. As You Sow is a great group that sort of you can type in, whatever funds you're holding your 401k or pension in, and it will tell you not just what you hold, but also any sort of problematic investments that might be there in terms of impact on climate or communities. So I would say in isolation, it's probably not the shareholder tracker is not enough, but it's a good starting point if you sort of are using it in conjunction with other tools. And then I would also say if you're, banking, our commercial debt tracker, which we are going to launch soon in the next few months, that's extremely useful. So if you have a bank account with a commercial bank and you want to know what sort of corporate banking relationships it has, the commercial debt tracker will absolutely tell you that. It's going to tell you, what kinds of companies and projects your bank is doing business with, which can be quite useful to ensure that you're not, banking with a bank that's doing bad things in the world.
Hey, thanks, Dustin. One question just about fees and whether these tools will remain free, I think. And if I'm getting this wrong, again, please reach out. But for now, these are free. I don't, there are no fee to use these tools. That's part of our whole intention with them is to make this information openly accessible. And then just one last question. I think I'm going to read it because, but when sanctions reduce corporate transparency in extractive jurisdictions, companies stop filing, auditors leave, beneficial ownership chains go dark. What methodologies do you use to maintain tracking? Specifically satellite data, mirror trade statistics, local court records. Is there a framework for combining these with pre-sanctions baseline data to show what changed after exit? Dustin, do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's definitely something that we've done at IDI looking at sanctioned companies. We have on our Follow the Money toolkit, we have a tab on open source intelligence that has a lot of these tools, satellite data, ship tracking, that sort of thing. So I would encourage you to look there. There are groups out there like Bellingcat, of course, that do this kind of research. So there are other resources, I think, that you can use. In terms of the shareholder tracker and DeBIT, sort of looking at historic data, as Lana was saying, you can get historic data with DeBIT. So if you wanted to look at investments that are no longer active that a development bank might have made with a sanctioned entity, you can get that data. I mean, if you remember from our AngloGold Ashanti search, we found a project from 1996. So it was long ago, but we're still capturing that data, and you can download it. Lana, are we capturing historic data on the shareholder tracker? Is that something that people could download, or are we just doing the most recent?
So the table itself is most recent, but there is a data downloads page, and we're planning to just keep that updated. With every quarterly release, we'll just add more data files that can be downloaded.
Great, thank you both. It's time to wrap up, but I just, thank you, Lana, Dustin, super interesting. Thank you to everyone who joined. Really happy to see lots of interest in these. And this is the start, or not the start, this is the continuation of our conversations and development of these tools. And if you had a question that we weren't able to answer today, please reach out. Emails are in the chat, and of course you can also email me if you want to get in touch with anyone. And yeah, we're looking forward to continued collaboration with you, Lana and DSI, and with folks on this call who are interested in these methods and learning more. So stay tuned for more webinars and trainings, and thank you so much, and have a great morning, day, evening, wherever you are.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.